King Henry VIII was obsessed with his legacy. When his sister married without his permission, he saw it as betrayal, and he tried to erase her bloodline. Her husband, her children, even her grandchildren were stripped of freedoms and forced to live in the shadows. But 500 years later, that same blood returned to the throne through Princess Diana. In the most astonishing way possible. Princess Diana's story was never the fairy tale the world believed. The shy girl, the glamorous dresses, the tragic ending. That was the version the palace wanted everyone to see. But Diana's family name, Spencer, held something far older. Something dangerous. She wasn't just marrying into royalty. She was bringing it back. For centuries, her family carried bloodlines that kings tried to erase. Lines that queens locked away. Lines that history declared finished. And yet, they survived. Most people thought Diana was an ordinary girl, a young woman who worked as a kindergarten assistant, a so-called commoner who somehow won Prince Charles's heart. But her family's story went back further than the Windsors themselves. The Windsor name, the name of Britain's royal family, was only adopted in 1917. Before that, they were the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a dynasty with German roots. The Spencers, on the other hand, had been tied to English nobility for nearly 500 years. They weren't just wealthy landowners. They were guardians of royal blood, blood that had been hunted, hidden, and nearly destroyed. To find Diana's true legacy, we go back to the time of Henry VIII. Not to his many wives, but to his younger sister, Mary Tudor. Mary was forced into marriage with King Louis XII of France. He was old enough to be her grandfather. Within months, he was dead. Mary was free, but only in name. Her brother, Henry VIII, still controlled her fate. And she knew he would marry her off again for politics. But Mary had already given her heart to someone else, Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk. He was Henry's closest friend. Their love was a crime. To defy the king was treason. To love his sister was death. And yet, they did it anyway. In a chapel outside Paris, Mary and Charles were married in secret. Witnesses later whispered that as they spoke their vows, a sudden gust of wind burst through the doors, as if nature itself marked the moment. Some said it was an omen, a warning. That love this bold would only end in blood. When Henry VIII discovered his sister's secret marriage, his anger shook the court. They had defied him. They had embarrassed him before Europe. But Henry did not order their deaths. Instead, he punished them in another way. Their lands were taken. Their wealth was stripped. Their children were kept under watch. They lived, but not in freedom. They were prisoners of the crown, and their family would carry that shadow for generations. From this line came Frances, Mary Tudor's daughter. Frances married into the Grey family. From her came 3 daughters: Jane, Catherine, and Mary Grey. Jane Grey, remembered as the 9 Days Queen, was brilliant and bookish, but only 16. She didn't seek power. She was placed there by powerful men who wanted to block Mary Tudor, Henry VIII's eldest daughter, from taking the throne. For just over a week, Jane wore the crown. But the people rallied behind Mary instead. Jane was dragged to the Tower of London. Even her own mother abandoned her to save herself. On the day of her death, Jane walked calmly to the scaffold. Blindfolded, she stretched out her hands and whispered, "What shall I do? Where is it?" Her fingers found the block. Moments later, the axe fell. She was 17. Her sisters also met cruel fates. Catherine Grey married in secret and had children who carried Tudor blood. Queen Elizabeth I saw this as a threat and locked her away until she wasted away at 27. Mary Grey, mocked for her small size, also married without permission. She too was locked away, living out her days in obscurity. The message from the crown was clear. This bloodline would never be allowed to thrive. And yet it did not die. Through quiet marriages into smaller families, country gentry, squires, even priests, their descendants lived on. On the surface, they seemed ordinary, respectable, but unimportant. But in silence, families like the Spencers kept the records. They arranged marriages carefully. They preserved what others tried to destroy. By the 16th and 17th centuries, they had gathered more than land and money. They had gathered the hidden blood of England's lost kings and queens. The most shocking part of Diana's ancestry wasn't just Mary Tudor. It was Henry VIII himself. History tells us his dynasty ended with Elizabeth I, who died childless. But that was the official version, the cleaned-up story. In truth, Henry had acknowledged at least one illegitimate son, Henry FitzRoy. The boy was given titles, land, and the king's open affection. Many believed that had he lived past 17, Henry would have made him heir. FitzRoy's line did not vanish. Through marriages across centuries, it eventually joined with the Spencers, and that wasn't all. Many historians believe Henry also fathered Catherine Carey, Anne Boleyn's sister. Catherine's descendants, too, married into the Spencers. If true, Diana carried not just one Tudor inheritance, but two. More Tudor blood than the Windsors ever had. The Spencers did not preserve random names. They absorbed entire lines that the crown tried to erase. The illegitimate children of Charles II, the hidden descendants of James II, the Plantagenets, thought extinct after Richard III. The Stuarts, who had fought and died for the throne. Piece by piece, marriage by marriage, the Spencers became custodians of lost monarchies. By the 20th century, they had become a living archive of Britain's buried royal history. So when Diana Spencer walked down the aisle in 1981, the world swooned. A commoner had married a prince. The perfect fairy tale. But inside the palace, genealogists knew better. Diana wasn't chosen only for her charm. She was chosen because her bloodline carried what the Windsors lacked. Her name carried the legacy of Mary Tudor, Jane Grey, Henry FitzRoy, and Catherine Carey. Through Diana, forbidden blood returned to the crown. Her sons, William and Harry, do not just inherit Windsor legitimacy. They inherit the Tudors. They inherit the Plantagenets. They inherit the Stuarts. Bloodlines kings once tried to destroy. Bloodlines queens once locked away. Bloodlines history declared finished. Now, they sit closest to the throne. Henry VIII once tried to crush this legacy, but 500 years later, it endures. It survived in shadows. It survived in silence. And it survived through the Spencers. When the world remembers Diana, they see her shy smile, her blue eyes, her compassion. But if you look deeper, you see more. You see Mary Tudor, who risked everything for love. You see Charles Brandon, who defied a king. You see Jane Grey, who walked to her death at 17. You see Catherine Carey, perhaps Henry VIII's hidden daughter. Their bloodline never vanished. It waited until Diana brought it back into the light. She was not just the people's princess. She was something older, something defiant. The Tudors' revenge, a story that began in a windswept French chapel 500 years ago, still alive today in the blood of a future king.